Imagine waking up tomorrow morning, but you've suddenly shrunk to the height of a 3-year-old child. Your muscles are radically downsized. Your reach is cut in half. And your brain has physically shriveled to the size of a single grapefruit. But the world around you didn't shrink with you. Instead, your backyard is now ruled by birds that stand 6 feet tall, with heavy, razor-sharp beaks designed to swallow animals your size whole. Your local park is patrolled by venomous, 10-foot lizards that can smell your blood from miles away. And if you want to eat, your only option is to team up with your neighbors to hunt a wild beast that weighs as much as a delivery truck, using nothing but stones you chipped by hand. This isn't a concept for a fantasy movie. This is the literal, daily reality of Homo floresiensis, a distinct, real species of ancient human that lived on a rugged island in Indonesia. While our direct ancestors were developing language and spreading across the globe, these tiny humans were running a daily survival gauntlet against a cast of prehistoric monsters. And they didn't just survive for a weekend. They ruled their island for over 100,000 years. But how? How did a human with a brain smaller than a chimpanzee's avoid being completely erased from the food chain on day one? To understand their secret, we have to look at one of the strangest evolutionary experiments in Earth's history. For centuries, scientists had a very neat, comfortable theory about human evolution. They believed that as humans evolved, we got taller, our brains got bigger, and we became more dominant. But in 2003, deep inside a limestone cave called Liang Bua, that entire theory was blown to pieces. Archaeologists digging through 20 feet of ancient ash uncovered a skeleton. It belonged to an adult female, but she was the size of a modern 3-year-old child. Initially, the scientific community refused to believe it. They figured this must have been a single person with a rare genetic mutation or a severe growth disorder. But then they dug deeper, and they found more. An entire population of miniature humans who had lived, hunted, and died in this cave for generations. This wasn't a deformity. This was an entirely new branch of the human family tree. But why were they so small? The answer lies in a strange biological phenomenon that turns normal evolution on its head. When a species gets trapped on an island with limited food, resources are scarce. If you're a giant animal, you starve. But if you're small, you survive on barely any food. Over thousands of years, the island acts like a shrinking machine. And that's how our ancient cousins ended up the size of toddlers. But while the humans shrank to survive, the island did something else. Something much more dangerous. While the humans on Flores were shrinking, other species were growing. Without mainland predators to keep them in check, small creatures ballooned into absolute giants. And the results were terrifying. First, meet the giant Flores marabou stork. Forget the cute cartoon birds that deliver babies. This stork stood 6 feet tall, weighed 30 pounds, and couldn't fly. Instead, it stalked the volcanic plains on muscular legs, armed with a massive, heavy beak. It was a cold-blooded carnivore. To a 3-foot-tall human, this bird was a literal dinosaur, actively hunting anything small enough to fit down its throat. But the sky wasn't the only place to look. On the ground, you had to watch the shadows. Flores was ruled by Komodo dragons and an even larger, now extinct giant monitor lizard. These beasts don't just bite. They lie in wait, perfectly camouflaged in the dry leaves. When they strike, they inject a toxic cocktail of venom that prevents your blood from clotting. Even if you escape their jaws, you slowly bleed to death in the jungle while the lizard calmly follows your scent, waiting for you to collapse. This was the neighborhood our tiny cousins lived in. Every time they stepped out of their cave, they were entering an active war zone. But they had to step out. Because they had to hunt. To feed their families, these 3-foot-tall humans didn't hunt rabbits or squirrels. They went after the biggest prize on the island, the stegodon. Now, the stegodon was a dwarf elephant, but dwarf is a relative term. It still weighed up to 4,000 pounds, the size of a modern SUV. For a team of tiny, 60-pound humans, attacking a stegodon was a suicide mission. One stomp and you're history. But the Hobbits had a plan. They didn't fight fair. Archaeologists found that the bones of baby stegodons inside the cave were covered in precise butcher marks. They were actively targeting the calves. But even a baby elephant has a protective, angry mother nearby. To pull this off, the Hobbits had to use the ultimate weapon, cooperation. They would map out the island's volcanic terrain, finding narrow ravines and steep, natural dead ends. Using fire and noise, a hunting party would terrify a young elephant, driving it away from the herd and into a natural trap. Once the beast was bottlenecked and unable to turn around, the tiny hunters would swarm. They would strike from the high ridges of the ravine, using heavy, razor-sharp stone spears to systematically wear the giant down. It was a masterpiece of tactical planning. And it proved something that scientists are still struggling to explain. For decades, science told us that to make complex tools, plan hunts, and build communities, you needed a massive brain. Our modern brains are huge, about 1,400 cubic centimeters. The Hobbits? Their brains were just over 400. That's the exact same size as a chimpanzee's. Yet, chimps don't make symmetrical stone blades, and they don't hunt elephants. So, how did Homo floresiensis pull this off? When scientists scanned the interior of their fossilized skulls, they found something mind-blowing. Evolution didn't just shrink their brains. It completely re-engineered them. The frontal lobe, the part of the brain that handles decision-making, planning, and teamwork, was incredibly dense and heavily folded. They had a super-compressed, ultra-efficient brain. And they used that brain power to master the most important technology of the prehistoric world: fire. Deep inside Liangbua Cave, scientists found layers of charcoal and ancient hearths. Fire was their ultimate shield. In a world where giant carnivores ruled the dark, a crackling fire at the cave's mouth was the only thing keeping the monsters at bay. It turned their cave from a trap into an impregnable fortress. For over 100,000 years, this bizarre, beautiful ecosystem survived. But then, around 50,000 years ago, the fires in Liangbua went out. The Hobbits, the giant storks, and the pygmy elephants all vanished from the island's history. What happened? Some scientists believe a massive volcanic eruption choked the island in ash, destroying the food chain. But there is a far more chilling theory. 50,000 years ago is the exact moment a new predator arrived on Flores. Taller, faster, with massive brains and insatiable appetites. Homo sapiens. Did we hunt them to extinction? Did we push them out of their caves and leave them to the monsters? We may never have a definitive answer. But their story changes everything we thought we knew about ourselves. It proves that human intelligence doesn't belong to a single, giant-brained species. And that sometimes, the smallest among us are the ones who fight the hardest. Would you have survived a single day in their world? Let me know in the comments, and hit subscribe to uncover more forgotten chapters of our history.